Everyone, it's Attorney Matthew Legan Sanchez here. Today, let's talk about how restraining orders can impact your divorce in Albuquerque, New Mexico. First off, a restraining order being filed during your divorce, it can make the divorce much messier. Starting off a divorce with a restraining order is kind of like starting off a race and you immediately get tripped and you get up and you're focusing on the other person and you want to strike back and you're not focusing on the race, you're focusing more on striking back. Same thing with the restraining orders. When a restraining order is filed with a divorce, it starts off a divorce with a strike and strike back mentality. And this can make the divorce longer, it can lead to more motions being filed, it can lead to more discovery being issued, and it can ultimately just make the divorce longer and more expensive and more emotionally draining as well. So restraining orders at the beginning of a divorce can really make the process messier. A second common way that restraining orders are used during divorce, pretty common, is it forces one person out of the home. So for instance, sometimes a spouse will file a bogus restraining order, the relationship's on the rocks, one person goes and files a restraining order, there's not really much merit to it, but in New Mexico, usually they'll lean on the side of caution and a temporary restraining order will be entered. So this temporary restraining order is entered, it forces one person out of the house, okay, until there's a hearing set. The person in the home changes the locks and then files for divorce and basically hits the other person with the divorce when they're out of the house. So then technically they're not violating a temporary domestic order that says they can't change the locks or change status quos. But if they do that before the divorce, if they do that when the restraining order is pending, it's kind of a gray area. So it forces one person out of the home and it kind of gives one person leverage at the beginning of a divorce and it just makes the divorce more messy. One of the biggest ways that a restraining order can impact a divorce is that it can create a status quo with time sharing and custody. When a restraining order involves children, if it's entered, the restraining order court, the domestic violence court, has 6 months of power jurisdiction to enter a time sharing order. Now moving forward, this time sharing order creates what's called the status quo. And the status quo, the longer it rolls and the longer it goes, it can impact, it can cement, and it becomes harder and harder for the domestic matters court, the divorce court, to change. So at times, in order to get leverage or for a preemptive strike, a parent will file a restraining order, make allegations of abuse or neglect involving the children, maybe get CYFD involved, and if a restraining order is ultimately entered, it can really have a big impact on the divorce. So what can you do? Don't give your ex, your spouse, any ammunition to file a restraining order. Don't do it. Don't send them insulting or threatening text messages. Don't call them really offensive words that a female or a male hearing officer would find, repugnant, that they would find that that's an act of abuse, that it's there to cause severe emotional distress. Don't do it. Look, every divorce entails some degree of uncomfortable or not agreeing arguments, but those arguments don't have to rise to the level of pushing, breaking objects, insulting someone, getting in their face. All of those may be an act of abuse under the Family Violence Protection Act. You don't necessarily have to punch your spouse. You don't necessarily have to go crazy with a gun. Sometimes just sending a super offensive text message, it's enough to get a restraining order. So don't give them ammunition to fire off a bogus restraining order that's gonna make your divorce more expensive, more stressful, and take a lot more time. You're gonna have the involvement of 2 courts, domestic violence court and a domestic matters court. So don't give them ammunition. If you know that your relationship is on the rocks, it's just hanging by a loose thread and you're about to fall, then do not do anything in the universe that could be considered an act of abuse, because you're giving your ex, you're giving your spouse ammunition to go file a restraining order, force you out of the home, maybe get status quo with the children that's going to impact you for a long time in your divorce case. So just don't do it. Do you still have questions about how a restraining order is going to impact your divorce in Albuquerque or across New Mexico? If so, talk with an experienced restraining order and divorce attorney. Call me, call Matthew Legan Sanchez. You can reach me at calling 505-SANCHEZ, and you can talk to me about your divorce and restraining order case. Call 505-SANCHEZ today.